Alright everybody, I am Kevin from The Real Movie Guys, and you are watching The Real Review, where we review all your favorite movies. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Mortal Kombat. MMA fighter Cole Young seeks out Earth's greatest champions in order to stand against the enemies of Outworld in a high-stakes battle for the universe. I know I'm not alone in feeling this, but this film had a lot of hype to live up to. After several years of development issues and a promise of getting a film that is closer to the video games than ever before, the excitement was off the charts. Finally, after the cheesy PG-13 theatrical attempts in the 90s, we were going to see Mortal Kombat in all its bloody, unrestricted, rated R glory. Unfortunately, while the movie does pay tribute to its legions of fans, as a film, it really falls flat and fails to live up to the potential that this franchise truly has. The opening and closing sequences of this film are by far the most engaging parts of the movie, ironically featuring the game's most notorious characters, Scorpion and Sub-Zero. The choreography and the story it is telling are the most compelling story elements in this movie. The opening essentially being the origin of their feud, taking place in a feudal era, really shows off the potential the story had, weaving an emotional narrative that the rest of the film seemingly forgot to follow up with until a brutal clash at the end of the movie, having both characters don their classic ninja attire. The choreography is top-notch, and even the cinematography feels distinctively different, focusing on the excellent back and forth between the two characters. The reason these two sequences even work is due to the actors behind them. Hiroki Sanada has a limited presence in the movie. He carries Scorpion with a heavy edge to him, making his quips and famous line, "You know the one," even more exciting when it hits.
Get over here!
Then you have Joe Taslim. Comes in and chews the scenery in the best way possible. For lack of a better word, he brings a cold and cruel take to the Bihan Sub-Zero character. With the limited dialogue he is given, you can tell he's just having a good time being bad. Also uniquely with Sub-Zero, they really treat him to this horror movie style presence when he appears in the real world, adding a foreboding presence of ice slowly materializing onto the scenery. Too bad this type of style isn't indulged further because it could have really added something special to this movie. Horror and Mortal Kombat really have a great chemistry together. Another standout performance that I feel like most people will gravitate to is Josh Lawson as Kano. The actor really brings the snide and raunchy Aussie to life with his antagonist quibbling with the rest of the cast. Even when this movie is attempting to be serious with its material or characters, you can count on Kano to come in and undercut it with a surprisingly on-point joke. At times, he feels like a fan's commentary on the ridiculous plot points they try to get away with.
I think I get it now. It's kind of like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Is it going to be fireballs? Is it going to be lightning? Huh? Could be shit. Could be a frisbee hat. You know, no offense, whoever you are.
One thing this film didn't skimp on is its crushing rendition of the classic 90s Mortal Kombat theme song, mixing a modern injection of classic dance and synthesizing tunes with the classic vocal cues and beats of the original. It's awesome to see something so beloved by fans, even more so than the classic movies it derives from, treated so well and honored in a new iteration. Mortal Kombat, even at its worst, really is dedicated to making the fans happy with its myriad of references, from the actual choreography mimicking the moveset of the characters, to others saying out loud the famous lines,
Flawless victory.
Kano wins.
The inclusion of fatalities in this film, what most would consider a staple that Mortal Kombat has left on pop culture, are just as glorious as you could imagine. This is really the only time the film takes advantage of its R rating to its fullest, giving us bloodthirsty fans what we wanted. And I think that is really where this film begins to fall apart. While trying to please fans with the visuals and correct inclusions of famous fighters from the series, it's hard to really find validity in many of the choices they made throughout the film. The story maybe being the most gruesome offender. I would consider myself someone pretty adept in the knowledge as far as Mortal Kombat lore is concerned, and while I got the general gist of the plot because of that knowledge, it still felt like a greatest hits reel of Mortal Kombat moments. The movie doesn't really delve deeper into any of the characters or backstory, which is surprising because the games have ironically gotten more competent in their later iterations, to where this is commonly applauded. I felt like I was given just a taste of everyone's story, and because of that, the film's characters feel weaker and extremely lacking in depth. This also translates to issues with the plot, where the cast is trying to seek out chosen Earth fighters for Mortal Kombat tournament. However, there is no tournament in this movie. It feels like an unnecessary prequel that sets up the actual tournament and does little to explain all these different realms, fighters, and overall mechanics on how this world works. There's also a curious explanation of how the fighters get their powers in the film, and I found it completely unnecessary. I mean, you mean to tell me a character ripping out someone's heart doesn't need to be explained, but someone who can shoot out fireballs and needs to unlock your power moment with excruciatingly bland training sequences, the film doesn't take itself too seriously, so why have the inclusion of having powers, quote unquote, make sense? Just an overall strange choice in my opinion. This also leads into one of the other strangest choices of the film, the inclusion of Cole Young, played by Louis Tan. I want to make it clear that even though Cole is a new character original to the movie, that is not the reason he's bad. Actually, I'd be able to excuse that if the inclusion of this character helped the story. From what I gather, the writers of this film wanted to have a character looking on from the outside to help ease the audience into the world of Mortal Kombat, which in of itself is a smart decision. The problem is he's written so bland and cliche that I actually couldn't stand moments he was on screen. Everything about him, from his overly done "I have a family to protect" reasoning to his relationship to a famous Mortal Kombat competitor just because, feels so forced. Unfortunately, Louis Tan's acting just builds upon these issues even worse, delivering a performance so wooden and soulless that, again, I couldn't even find myself slightly caring about this character or his obstacles he has to face. I would also like to mention that the build up to him being granted this fighter power was so underwhelming that I kept finding myself saying, is this it? There's one key scene of dialogue where Liu Kang is telling Cole about his and Kung Lao's backstory, and I couldn't help but feel if they had instead used that story as the basis for the plot and maybe had them as the co-main characters instead of Cole, that the story would have been richer because of it, instead of focusing on someone that obviously doesn't work. The majority of the cast also falls under the whole underwhelming or wooden acting banner as well. The villains, you can tell, were brought to the big screen as fatality fodder due to them being seriously obscure so that their deaths wouldn't impact or hurt the fans' feelings. There are a couple notable exceptions, however, but I won't mention them in here because of spoilers. For a film called Mortal Kombat, you would think this movie would be brimming with brutal action. Well, I hate to surprise you, but there are not really that many fight scenes to speak of. Even the ones that happen in the movie, minus the opening and closing scenes of course, they are just too often obscured and distracted by quick cuts and zoom-ins. I really never felt like I could get a true sense of how the fight was progressing, because the camera never lingered long enough to give me any sense of impact. Any shot landed or any cool move executed was just quickly washed away in multiple cuts and muddy cinematography, which is really a shame because I think the choreography was overall decent. And truly maybe that is Mortal Kombat's greatest sin, just not being able to leave an impact. For such an iconic game franchise that just had generations of fans yelling, "Finish him!" It's a shame that this movie just couldn't make headway in its theatrical release, which leads me to my final score. I'm going to give Mortal Kombat a D+.
Hey, fuck you, pretty boy. I'm a popular guy. Everyone loves me.
Funny to see a lot of people complain about the 90s version of this film, and yes, while this film is leagues better than its sequel, Mortal Kombat Armageddon, I just can't help but feel the 90s version had me more invested with its characters, which is saying a lot if you've seen that movie.
The fate of billions will depend upon you.
Well, I won't say I hated my time watching this film. The Scorpion and Sub-Zero moments really are top-notch. The film just can't deliver the promise of competent storytelling and action all wrapped in one bloody package. While yes, the tributes and nods to the franchise are fun and exciting to see, I would argue you'd be better off grabbing a copy of the game and button-mashing your way to a windscreen. If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And also, for all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcast platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys and we should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin and we are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.